Hey, everybody, we have a very special guest who's joining us from New York City. We're going to be talking about love and love notes, which is something really special and near and dear to our guest's heart. We're talking with award-winning writer, author, producer, director, actor, educator extraordinaire. Heather Christie is joining us here to share Love Notes, which is a book, but it's also a special show and lots more. And everywhere it has had an opportunity to be presented, sellout crowds, people can't get enough of it. And it's going to be happening in New York City right around the time of Valentine's Day. So we have her on just in time. Heather, the Lady of Love. Cupid is here. Welcome to the Jim Master Show, my friend.
Thank you, Jim. I'm so honored to be here and to talk with you about Love Notes and just share my vision and hopefully get people excited about spreading some love.
Very excited about it as well. And I know this, as I mentioned, is something that is near and dear to your heart. And as I say, the search is over, everybody. You can discover America's best true love stories and more in Love Notes, because it's real stories, real people, real love. And this anthology is inspired by the New York City off-Broadway storytelling show, one-of-a-kind storybook offering true tales of first love, last love, and all the messy love in between, plus thoughtful journal prompts, inspiring quotes, and fun puzzles. You will fall head over heels with this healing, humorous, and hopeful, wonderful book. And here's to spreading love one story at a time. And our viewers who watch all around the world know that we say our show has a lot of levity, which is love and levity put together. You cannot have enough love, right, Heather? We've got to increase the love quotient in our lives, don't we?
Yes, we do. And I've thought a lot about love and what that means. And it's what makes us human, right? Is the ability to love. And when we leave this place, if there's anything we take with us, I think it's probably the love, the memories and the love. Yes.
So you have this incredible background. We'll talk about Love Notes in a second, but
Sure.
I mean, you've done so much writing and producing, directing, and started out as an actor as well. Tell us about the early journeys and inspirations for you that even attracted you to the world of performance and writing and entertainment.
Sure. Well, I live in New York City now. I'm on the Upper West Side. But as a kid, I grew up in rural Pennsylvania, like farm country. If you head through the Lincoln Tunnel on Route 78 and you just keep going west for 2 hours, you end up in the hills of the Ole Valley. And so, but as a kid, I wanted to be an actress. So before homeschooling was like the thing, I would go to school in the morning for 3 periods. I would get on a bus. And it wasn't like I was just commuting from New Jersey or Hoboken. I would ride 2.5 hours into the city and I would go on go-sees, auditions. If I had a booking, I would do that. And I did that as a teenager from the time I was 15. And then I graduated early from high school and moved to New York City as a 17-year-old and thought I was going to be my career was going to be in show business. I was going to be an actress. And I was sort of at that place where you start to hit. I was screen testing for some stuff. When the soaps were filmed here, I was on a couple of soaps, and I thought I was going to be a creative. I thought this is going to be the trajectory of my life. And I'd started college at Fordham Lincoln Center, and then I fell in love at 19. So I have kind of an unusual story that way. I married really, really young. And he was a professional soccer player. And I ended up leaving all of my sort of show business aspirations behind to follow his career around the United States. And then when I started hitting middle age, this part of me sort of started kicking up again. This isn't kind of who I set out to be. I was in real estate. I was not doing anything creative. But I'd always been a writer, just in my own private journal. And I would write very bad poetry. But I started writing. I had a scene in my head. And so I ended up going back to school and getting an MFA 15 years ago. And that's sort of what started this trajectory that has now led me to LoveNotes in New York City. I mean, there's a whole bunch of other pieces to it, but that's kind of where you asked like how it started. So it started, I thought I was going to be an actress as a young person. And it turns out I'm a writer and I'm a storyteller and I like being the boss. So I like doing the producing and the directing and all that stuff. And yeah, so that's kind of how I'm here right now, sitting and talking to you.
You mentioned soaps, and we do have a fan base of soap fans that do watch our show. They also love Lifetime movies, the Hallmark Channel, and everything else. What were the soaps that you were on? Do you recall?
So I did, like, when you're first starting out in this business, like your agent will try to get you on an under 5. So you just kind of get familiar with what a set is like. And then you move up to like a day player and then hopefully a principal part. So I'd been on All My Children and Another World and As the World Turns. And then I had some day players on As the World Turns.
Mm-hmm.
And then I screen tested for, I'm going to get it confused. I screen tested for Another World. Yeah.
Another World,
so
yes.
A character, her name was Laura Webb. And so there was a guy, like when you start out the big cattle call, there's like, hundreds of people auditioning. And it was for 2 new characters. And just by chance, I was matched up with this other guy. And we had this kind of like real chemistry. And so we sort of got pushed through together, like each round. And we made it to the final round, like to the screen test. And the night before the screen test, he called me, and he was in college too at the same time. And he's like, I've been talking with my dad, and we really don't think that this is like the trajectory of my life. I'm studying to get my business degree and MBA. He's like, so I've decided I'm not going to come tomorrow to the screen test. So, and I'm not trying to make an excuse, but that kind of really just threw me at that point. And I ended up not getting the part. Somebody else did. And then at the same time, I was falling in love, and I left New York. I just left. I said, okay, well, fine, I'm leaving then. And that was the end of my soap career.
That was, you weren't washed up by any stretch of the imagination. You were just getting started because your writing really sort of took hold, right? When did the writing start coming in for you? Because you're a brilliant writer.
Yeah, the writing happened really started about 20 years later. And I've written 2 young adult books. And that was sort of my segue into this space. And at the same time, I was doing like a bunch of, I have 2 young adult children. By the way, the marriage it lasted pretty long. I was married for decades until that dissolved, and that's sort of how
Parting of the ways. And was that some of the inspiration from?
But the writing really sort of took hold for me around, I would say like around 2005. I went back to school and I got an MFA in creative writing and worked on my thesis that became like my first book. But at the same time, to try to build an audience, to get people to, so that when the book would come out, there'd be somebody who would read it, I started blogging. And that was kind of a very popular time for mommy blogging.
Right.
And I heard about this show called Listen to Your Mother, which is, it's stories about motherhood. And I auditioned for the show in Baltimore. And so I was cast in that. And so I was in Listen to Your Mother, performing a piece I'd written about my daughter. And then I had such a wonderful experience. I was like, wow, I want to do this. Like, I want to put a show together. I want to do this myself. So I ended up getting the license for Listen to Your Mother and produced that in Pennsylvania. And then I produced it here in New York. But at the same time, some other stuff was sort of happening in my life. And that's where LoveNotes comes from. And I knew when this idea came to me that I want to do the same thing. Like, I want to figure out how to facilitate people's stories, put them on stage, but I didn't want it, because Listen to Your Mother, is like a stage show. I wanted to do a stage show, but because I'm a writer, I knew I wanted to put together an anthology, and I wanted to also launch podcasts, which that's coming in the third quarter of this year. So we did the show last year. We're doing it this year. We've got the first book out. And in my mind, I see like, okay, I want to do, I have all these different ideas. I want to do a heartbreak survival guide. I want to do how we met, different themed love notes too.
That's fantastic. The book itself is really something special and, again, near and dear to your heart. Tell us about the book, because there are real stories. People, open up and they share elements of their life and their loves. What was the inspiration for the actual book?
So just like you're saying, well, for me, I wanted to know, in the wake of divorce and some dating disappointment, a lot of dating disappointment, I sort of became indignantly curious. And I'm like, well, what is real love? What does it look like? How, why is this so hard? And can somebody please show me, tell me? So that's sort of where the battle cry came from. And I asked people, and I started putting out in different places, where writers will submit for, as writers, we have all these different places you can submit. And I started, I'm looking for real love stories. It's the only criteria was that it had to be true love stories of 1,000 words or fewer, because I wanted it to be digestible nuggets that people could read. I could read and say, okay, love exists for everybody. It's going to exist someday for me too. And so that's where it kind of came from. And because I'm a writer first, I knew I wanted to see it in black and white, right? Because the stage show, it's fabulous. Oh my gosh, it's such a wonderful experience when people get up and give testimony and tell their stories. But it's fleeting, right? And I tell the storytellers, I'm like, this is why we work on the performance aspect of it, because the audience is only going to get to hear your story one time. That's, you got to nail it on that one time. But with a book, you can read it again, and you can go back again. And so, but I wanted it to be a little bit different than a straight up anthology. And I wanted it to be accessible for anybody. If you're just, you have a few minutes sitting on the sofa and you want to read a quick story. So I wanted it to be accessible, well written though. And then I included, and this is, maybe it sounds crazy, Jim, I don't know. I designed all these what I call love puzzles. So for instance, I don't know if you'll be able to see this in the camera, but right here it says, when you're looking for love, look for these qualities. So, and then you have tenderness, enthusiasm, hope. And so I made all these different puzzles, which is kind of fun because as a very, very, very young person, I first started out as a visual artist. So we have puzzles, we've got love puzzles, but they go together with a story. So there's sort of this thread that pulls itself through the entire book. And then the book also has, in addition to these true love stories, I pulled quotes out that kind of work with the puzzle and the story. And then it's interactive in that they're also journal prompts. So this story was about a woman she was a really terrible romance writer, but she had this one character in her book that she kept writing, and he would go from book to book to book. And essentially what she ended up doing was writing her perfect man into existence, and he shows up. So that story, the journal prompt that goes with it here would be, if you could write your perfect partner into existence, describe what that person would be like. So the book, I call it a smash up if, say, Chicken Soup for the Soul meets Modern Love with an activity book.
It's perfect. I love it.
When we were in high school, the kind of things we would put in our notebooks,
exactly.
Little thoughts about the cute guy or your doodle, that sort of thing. So
what was that process like putting it all together? Because it's quite intensive and it's a great reference as much as it is entertaining as well. It's a great reference book as well, something you can continue to refer to as you're going along in relationships. What was that process like putting it together?
Well, it's really intense because I am a wordsmith. So the first thing I worked on, and worked, because I'm as the editor of the book, I worked very carefully with the writers to really get the story so that I like to say that it sings, so that somebody will pick it up, read it, and be able to read just these kind of nuggets and pull something out that's going to give them hope. So the first part, the really intense work, was working on each story. And we have 40 different stories in the book. And then the next part, and this is what I really love though, in like putting the show together as well as the book, is creating sort of the narrative arc. Like, how do these stories fit together and tell a larger story? So that's really fun. And I have a kind of interesting way of working. I end up, and whether I'm doing this, whether I'm casting for the show or working on the book, I print out everybody's stories and I make sure I have a picture of their face. And then I start lying them all over the floor, and I'll like shift and shuffle. And then I have, it's color coded, like stories that give hope and inspiration are pink. And then if it's sort of a sad story, it's blue, funny, it's green. So I sort of try to create this ride for the reader,
the producer part of you. Yeah.
Or for the audience member on the stage show. So that's pretty intense. And that can sometimes takes a little while to germinate. And I'm visual, like I said, from my early days. So I like to sort of see it too. So that was the first bit. And then once I had that laid out, then I was able to start thinking about these prompts, these questions that maybe we'd ask ourselves if we had read that story. Like, what was your one's about first kisses, and so one of the prompts is about your first kiss and what did that feel like, and was it gross, was it magical?
Do you remember your first kiss?
I do. Yeah.
Were you a kid?
Yes. Well, my very first kiss was on the Ferris wheel at the Ole Fair. We had a country fair. And I remember I was wearing, they're called, I can't even remember what they were called. They were like bloomers or half pants, something like that. I was like all dressed up. And this boy asked me to go on the Ferris wheel. And when we got to the top, he leaned over and he went on my cheek. I was like, So, yeah. How about you? Do you remember your first kiss?
I think it was elementary school. So that goes back to like 6th grade, maybe 11 years old. I would be chasing around Amy and Donna. This is out east on Long Island. And they were cheek kisses then. That's what you were allowed to do. And I remember it was really something. Back then in like 12th grade, Donna had remembered the kiss.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up on the same school bus. We went in different directions because we went to different junior high schools, and then everybody parts, from when you were in elementary school. But we ended up in the same bus in high school. And all of a sudden I'm sitting in the bus and she ends up on that bus. And it's like the last day of the last week of high school. And she comes up to me and I'm sitting in the seat and she goes, "I will never remember the guy who gave me my very first kiss ever. It was you."
Oh, wow.
And she held that with her all those years, that was pretty cool. 12th grade, last week of high school. And here she ends up on the same bus. It was just something that was magic. And how cool was that, huh?
That's cool. It sounds like a LoveNotes story to me.
That was really special. I tell you, yes. And I almost got in trouble too, because there was a ring sitting on my mother's bureau and I was a kid and I presented the ring in school and she wore it and she got excited and showed it all around. And then we got a phone call at the house from her mother calling my mother and said, "Mrs. Masters, this is Donna's mother." And they were probably just a few blocks away. But when you're a kid, it would be a long walk. And so the mother calls my mother she found, I guess, us then in the phone book and said, my daughter came home with a ring and it looks like a very, very expensive ring. Are you missing a ring? And she said, I don't think so. Let me go check. She goes, and she realizes that it's the engagement ring my father gave her
Oh,
that I ended up giving
oh,
sixth grade to Donna, not knowing what that ring meant, not knowing what that ring was about. It was just a beautiful ring. And she ended up having to walk the ring with her older sister to our house and present it. And there was going to be, a little bit of a penalty to pay for taking a ring and just lifting it without realizing it and giving it away. Good thing she showed her mother, and the mother was honest. And the mother, called my mother and said, Mrs. Masters, we have a ring here that might be yours. And I said, if there's going to be, like a spanking or anything like that, please don't do anything until, because my bedroom window was open, until at least they're at the end of the street so they don't hear anything.
Wow.
So she, on that bus as well, not only did she say, do I remember the very first guy who gave me my first kiss, but she said, I also will never forget the very first guy who gave me my very first ring, which was you. And it's this ring that was my mother's engagement ring, which my mother has, of course. How cool was that?
That is such a wonderful, sweet story. I love it.
Yeah. Well, we used to bring, it was a thing. I don't think they do it in school anymore, but we would bring, my father would clip off the rhododendrons or the azaleas, and then you'd wrap the bottom part in tinfoil, and we would present them to the bus driver, to the school teacher. We'd bring them flowers. We'd bring them, I don't think they do that anymore, but that was a thing at that time. So I say we got to spread some more love and levity around, right?
Yes. Yes.
But all those years later,
I love
12th
that
grade, she
story.
remembers that. Yeah. And then it turns out that my sister ended up being friends with her younger sister because they were same age, and they ended up in some of the same classes. And that story circulated. My brother, it was Jimmy at that time. My brother Jimmy gave your sister Donna her first ring when he was in sixth grade. Oh, we heard about that story. That was something, right? And yeah, and the rest is history. I love the idea that you're spending so much time on this, because not only is it a book, but this is an off-Broadway play. This is a show, and this is something really exciting, and it's coming up. You've done these kinds of things elsewhere to great fanfare. It's also, there's an opportunity for live streaming, so you can watch from wherever. Tell us about how it's gone into an actual production. You've actually brought all of this to life. That's very exciting. Congratulations on it.
Well, thank you. So actually the show started first because this is the second year. So we did the show last year, and then I did the book over the summer, and now we're doing the second annual All-Star.
Oh, I like that. So the book came out of the show?
Yes, the first.
Wow.
So many of the stories in last year's show are in the book, and then a couple of the stories for this year's show are also in the book. So there's like this sort of nice cross-pollination. So how we, here in New York, I put out a call through Backstage for storytellers. Like, you had to have a true story. You had to write it out first, and people could audition in person or by self-tape. And then I also pushed that out. So I do have across the country. So I do have a couple cast members who auditioned by self-tape and who are flying in for the show. So I'd say it's like probably 70% New Yorkers, and then we have like 30% of people coming from other areas. And then just a little side note on that. Yeah, our show is February 15th here in New York City. We have 3 shows that day, 2:00, 5:00, and 8:00. And then the 8:00, we're going to live stream. So you can watch that from anywhere in the world. And if you're logging onto Symphony Space and you're interested in the live stream, you kind of have to scroll down and it says live stream there. And it can, people always ask, well, if I can't watch it at that moment, because 8 p.m. is the middle of the night in other parts of the world, it will be live for, I think it's a week. So if you're not able to watch it right in that moment, you can watch it later. But yeah, so the stories that came in this year, and that's one of the challenges, because like a lot of times you'll get these stories that kind of have similar themes, and we can only take like one story about, you know, first kisses, and you might have 3 stories that are great, or 4 or 5. So that's the challenge for me, is picking like, okay, which story are we gonna go with there? I have, and this year I have a really, really heartwarming story. I don't want to give too much away, but 2 people who found each other in their 80s as they were both traveling through Mexico. And they're not actors or storytellers, but they are great. They're great. They have a great stage presence, and their story is just so heartwarming and wonderful. Yeah, so I'm super excited about this year's show. We have a really great diversity of story. We have all types of love represented. And we also have a musical component. So it's a little different from what people think of as storytelling, because a lot of times when people think of storytelling, they think of like the Moth or like a story slam, where people are kind of getting up and they might have an idea of what they're going to say, and then they're just sort of riffing. You know, they get up and it's a competition and things like that. LoveNotes is not like that. LoveNotes is more choreographed. Like, these are first-person testimonies. The writers have worked really hard on trying to get exactly what they want to say out. But then we also have a musical component. And we have, Jim, what would you, let me see, I'm going to ask you, what do you think would be the most iconic love song if you were going to play it at LoveNotes? Let's see if we're in sync.
You know, there's so many beautiful songs. I'm a big music buff, collector of music of all kinds of genres. There's so many spectacular songs. One that comes to mind that I asked my mother, what is your favorite all-time song? I asked my father too. My father has several. One of them, I believe, was sung by Andy Williams. It was Softly As I Leave You, which is a beautiful, beautiful song. My mother said Unchained Melody. That is her, and that is one of those amazing songs. I Will Always Love You is another one that comes to mind. But probably I would think of Unchained Melody, because just the way it sounds, how beautiful it is, and it evokes these really deep emotions. That would be one.
We're on the same page, because Unchained Melody opens the show. And actually, I Will Always Love You is in the show as well.
See?
You were right on the money.
I tell you, that's that levity. It's really amazing. And the place where you're doing it, I mentioned beautiful Symphony Space. Tell us about what it's like doing, you know, a show there. That is an iconic place where many fabulous shows have happened over the years as well.
Well, Symphony Space has 2 theaters, and they have what's called an, maybe your audience, because it sounds like they're pretty well educated, would know this. In New York City, we have different categories of theaters. So we have off Broadway, which is 100 seats or fewer. Then we have off-Broadway theaters, which are 100 to 500 seats. And then we have Broadway, which is 500 seats and higher. So and Symphony Space has 2 theaters. We're That's going right. to be in the off-Broadway theater, which is 169 seats. And we have the 3 shows. So my ultimate goal is, if we can sell out these 3 shows, is that next year we pop into, and I've reserved both theaters for next year. So everything is riding on your show, Jim.
Everything's writing on our show, gang.
I need people.
All right, Lovity Squad, let's
I
get
need
together.
I need you. I need you. I need you on February 15th. So my goal is if we can sell out the 15th, that we have both on hold for next year. We're going into the Broadway theater next year. So we're in the off Broadway this year, and then we're bumping up. But yes, and I have just a little story. We did this show last year at the Center at Park West, which is up on 86th and Amsterdam. And they're in a big fight with the landlord and the historic district. There have been some like famous people getting involved because it's like an artistic center. And I was set to do the show there. And I found out just before the holiday break that they had gotten legal action and that there was a chance that they would have their doors shut on February 15th. And I just panicked. I was like, oh my goodness, how am I'd already started selling tickets. I'm like, well, what am I going to do? And I raced around the city, and Symphony Space, I had reached out to them. They said, we are open that day. And I got on the subway, headed up there. I stepped out because it's an express stop for people who are not familiar with New York City. It's in 96th and Broadway. I came up out of the subway, and that marquee, like in my core, I was like, oh my gosh, everything has happened for a reason. This is where I'm supposed to go. And it just magically came together like 3 days before Christmas, before everything went dark for the holidays. And we flipped to Symphony Space. So I have been like running a little bit to try to catch up because I had been doing so much marketing and pushing people towards the center at Park West. I'm like, no. Now we go here. But I'm thrilled. They have been like just a notch above everybody I've ever dealt with. They're professional. The spaces are gorgeous. And for people who are thinking about maybe coming to the show, they have the building has these two theaters, and then in between they have a bar. But it's not like a lot of times when you go to theater, you can like walk up and get a drink. This is actually, before COVID hit, it was actually a bar that was open to the public all the time. But now they open it when they're having shows. But it's really nice to congregate. So you're able to come and sit down, and it's cold here right now. You can come in out of the cold, you can sit down and have a snack and a drink. So it lends itself to, I think, a nicer experience.
Sounds really fantastic, Heather. And one of the other things that's fantastic is some of those great stories of first love and last love, forever love, unrequited love, against all odds love. Everything is included. Tell us about that. How did you gather, these wonderful love stories, these love notes, and people were just willing to share. They were excited and willing to share their stories, their personal stories?
Yes. And it's not really surprising when you think about it, because everybody wants to hear a great love story, right? I mean, who wouldn't? And it is amazing. I have a comic, an up and coming comic who's in the show. And typically she's the funny girl. She's always telling funny stories. And she's like, I saw this call in backstage, and she's like, I wanted to take a chance. And she wrote a story, about meeting her girlfriend, the second date they ever went on. And she almost died. They ended up in the emergency room. I don't want to give too much away, but her name is Christina Kelly. She's an up and coming comic here in New York City. And she tells this gorgeous, beautiful story. And it was really, at the audition, she's breaking down in tears. And I tell my storytellers this. I said, it's really important, somehow you've ended up in this space at this moment in time because you're supposed to tell this story. But there's someone in the audience who needs to hear it even more. Mm. And that's really kind of like the ethos of the show, is that for some reason, I've curated your story. We're supposed to work on this because we're supposed to give it back to the world. Someone needs to hear it. And that's what I found is then after the show, and this is why I like the symphony space so much, because it has this kind of area to congregate, is after the show, I always choreograph it so that the storytellers exit and they go into the lobby or whatever space is outside of the theater. Because I found that the audience has this like need to connect with the storyteller then. And they want to talk to them and they want to say, oh my gosh, that happened to me, or, that really gives me hope. And the stories have done that for me as well. Like I started talking at the very beginning of the show, is I wanted to look for proof of love, like show me. So even when I'm feeling kind of down or discouraged, literally there's like that little voice in my head that says, Heather, well, think about Kay's story. Think about Sarah and Stacy's story. There's the proof. There's how you keep walking forward in faith. And so that's my hope, because I do feel like we're in like such a divisive time right now, that if we can use these love stories as sort of a unifying force that everybody can relate to, love is for everybody, and give hope, then I feel like, okay, then it all makes sense, right? That's why we're doing this. And I had this like really wonderful experience this past weekend. So I've started to license LoveNotes, and my 2 cities that have gone first, for lack of a better way of saying it, one was in Indianapolis, and that was produced by Haley Lawrence. And then the other one was in Chicago, and that was produced by Sarah Squires Doyle. So they were back to back. One was last Friday and then one was Saturday. So I flew out, and I was just like, wow, like they each sold out. They were smaller theaters, like 150, but they each sold out for like the first go, and something like nobody's ever heard of this before. And I was sitting there and I sort of like choked up, and I'm like, okay, like it all makes sense. This is what we're supposed to do. And, I'm hoping to find, so maybe there's some people in your audience, like they're involved in theater, or they don't have to be. I mean, I coached them. I have this like whole program on coaching people on how to bring a LoveNotes to their community, to sort of spread love and hopefully unify people. I kind of went off on a tangent there, but
No, it's terrific. It's all
I
part of the whole.
couldn't help myself.
Yes. And you've got all these fabulous people joining you, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
fantastic. It really is. Has it exceeded your expectations?
It has. And, part of me, like last year's show, we had maybe 350 people come to it. So it was a bigger space, then that's why we're doing 3 shows this year to try to, and plus the symphony space is it's more well-known.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we had a line around the block, and it was really, I was like, wow, I can't believe this. And I'm hoping that just wasn't like beginner's luck for the show, that like, because it seems like when I can get in front of people and talk to them, and when they come to the show, like just in Chicago and Indianapolis this past weekend, like there's such like this positive, warm feeling that everybody has. And if I can just get it in front of enough people, I'm hoping it can, get the wind under its wings that it needs to lift and go where it's supposed to go.
Enter Bette Midler, The Wind Beneath My Wings. It's a dream that has come true that you're taking to other levels, which I think is fantastic. And you have all these elements from the book to the actual show itself, the play, and you're going to do the podcast tied in as well, and all of these things and is there merchandise too? Are there mugs and shirts and tote bags and different things, perfumes, LoveNotes perfume,
Wow.
See?
All sorts of ideas, Jim.
Yes, that's it. I tell you.
The challenge is that I'm like a one-woman show at this point. I have my daughter helping me. But yes, I don't have merchandise quite yet, but I'm working on some stuff, and I'll let you see the first take at it. We are working on a LoveNotes tote bag. So that's not quite available yet.
I've done a lot
But
of work as a host on television for PBS, so I know a lot about the tote bags.
everybody needs a tote bag, right?
Everybody's got to have a tote bag.
So I'm
That's
working on that.
exciting.
Yeah, and then the next big thing. Well, and I just want to make sure to your audience understands that this is constantly evolving. Like each year is a new set of storytellers, and if there's anybody in your audience who has a love story, it's like, wow, I could share this story. I encourage, like I want your stories. There's so many different ways, like between the satellite shows that are popping up, the annual All-Star Off-Broadway show, and then the podcast. And the way I see the podcast happening is that it'll be a story that's already either been in a show or in the book. And the writer, performer will come on and they'll read their story. And then my job will be to do the story behind the story.
The story behind the
and
story.
ask all the questions that people have. And then it'll still be in two parts. That'll be like the first part, the longer part. And then each podcast will end with a love letter. Somebody can write a letter that says, like, "Dear Jim, this is why I love you." And then that will be read online. So there'll be the story behind the story, and then a love note.
That part where she says, "Dear Jim, I love you." Let's cut that out and use it for our promos. What have you? It's all about branding, right?
Right.
Levity is one of the things that came to be just because it slipped out of my mouth when I said the show has a lot of light, love, and levity, and just went from there. And sometimes that's what happens. LoveNotes is just a terrific concept, a terrific idea, and I think it brings people together of all ages. You're never too young or really too old to experience love or to fall in love with love again, right?
Mm-hmm. That's right. And that's an interesting thing. So when I'm auditioning and when people submit their stories, I've found that this year I've been a lot more deliberate in making sure I have all ages represented. But what I found is that I was getting more stories from older people. In fact, in this show, I have three I'm not going to say that word right, octarians. And I was like, what's going on there? So this year I was a little more deliberate in trying to get some stories from younger people. And I feel like we've accomplished that. I have three really strong younger people's stories. But you're right, Jim. There's no boundary on love, right? Like it can be at any age. And it's one thing that every culture experiences. We all know love. We know what it is. And we can't say that about everything, right? And that's why I try to keep believing like this is what can connect us all. And if we can, get enough people involved, we can do something.
What are some things you've learned about love or relearned about love through this process of LoveNotes, and maybe hearing some of the other stories of others and their experiences with love and their relationships, the ups, the downs, the beautiful moments? How has it enhanced or enriched your understanding of love?
Yeah. So one thing that it's really helped me with, because my parents were married for 53 years before my father died. And they had a very kind of traditional marriage, but a storybook in some ways. And I'm really grateful and blessed that I had a really happy childhood with two parents who really loved each other. And so that was the only model I knew. That if you didn't have like a long-term relationship that lasted the course of a lifetime, then it was like a paradigm for me. I thought that's the only way that love is real or can exist. And so that was really hard for me when I was the first person in my family on either side to ever divorce. And it was really very, very painful. And I felt very like a failure, like a real failure. And it's taken a lot of time to kind of come to terms with that. But LoveNotes has helped me because it has shown me that love it's just not isolated to these sort of long-term marriages, like the kind of iconic idea, fairy tale type of narrative that we kind of buy into and that I sort of had as my example growing up. And I'm lucky. I'm so grateful for that. But at the same time, it sort of made it hard for me to reconcile things in the real world. But LoveNotes has shown me, the stories have shown me that love can take all different forms. And sometimes there's one story in here, it's sort of a heartbreaking story, Forever in a Day. And it's a story about this sort of true love story of this man who met this woman, and it was for one day. And I know that might set people be like, oh, well, that couldn't be love. But you have to read the story to see what I'm talking about. But then again, it's also shown me that sometimes love happens the second time around. Or even in this year's show, I have a former HGTV host in it, Wanda Colon, and she's telling her story. Third time's a charm. So that's been one thing that I've been able to take through the experience of putting this all together, is that love really can come in all different forms at different times, and one is not greater than the other. So that's been a lesson for me.
What would you say to somebody who's watching who feels down and out, frustrated? Maybe they're coming out of a relationship, or maybe they've just never found the right person and they're hard on themselves and they're just listening to all those negative Nellies that are out there saying it'll never happen. And they're giving up and giving in and waving the white flag. There's always, you never know. Sometimes, love can pop up at the deli counter. It can be at any time, anywhere, if you are open to it, or at least see it and acknowledge it and allow it in. But what if somebody's watching who is closed down, the shades are down, and they've been through some things that weren't that great, and they love the romantic comedies, the movies, the TV shows, the music. They read all the romantic novels, but for them, they don't see it happening and they're giving in and giving up. What would you say to them?
I would say to them that this book, this show is for you and for me. It's not over yet, right? And these stories, and that's why, like, when we started our conversation, I said, like, I was that person. And sometimes I still am. And I'm like, well, why don't I have love? Like, what did I do wrong? And I was like, I want proof. Give me proof. I don't want to read some romance novel, a fiction novel. I don't want to, I will, or a romantic comedy. I want to hear real people's stories, because I believe for you and for me, if we can see that in other people, right, then it can be true for us too. So that's what I would tell them, is to take solace in these true stories. These are true stories. Nobody's made them up, and they're told by like real people, real stories, real love. And I hope that can give them like a little bit of hope. We cannot lose hope. Like, if you can just hang on to hope. And that's what I'm trying to do with the book and with the shows, and hopefully with the podcast then, is to be able to give people these kind of like nuggets of hope, because it can be a dark and lonely place. And I hope that they can feel that connection in the story, and help them just, maybe like you were saying, Jim, like, how do you stay open? How do you stay open when you've been disappointed, right? And sometimes you just need some proof. Like, just show me, give me a little evidence that it's possible. So that's what I would say to them.
Beautiful words. And, love can also come in all shapes and sizes, right?
Yes. Yeah. That's my little, you know, I say that's my little teacup poodle, Circe. And that's the other bit of advice I would give people who are down and lonely. I was never a dog owner, never, right? And in like as I started working on LoveNotes, and I was like kind of lonely, and this little pup and my therapist, if we can talk about our therapist, she said, Heather, you need, and this would be the other bit of advice I would give to your listener who's asking that question. And it's the same concept, though, as LoveNotes, is look for love in other places, other types and kinds of love. Because the more we surround ourselves with love, it's kind of like it creates that energy, right, that attracts. So is it in a pet? You know, is it, where do you feel and see love? And it can come in all forms. And we need to be grateful for it all. And I think when we open, I like how you used that term, like how do you stay open? Well, and I think part of that is being able to recognize and identify love, whether it's in your pets, whether it's in a relationship with your friends, your children. It's everywhere. It's everywhere. And we just need to look for it.
Absolutely.
And keep our energy in that place, because it's really easy to get distracted by the divisiveness and the nastiness that goes on in the world. And when we focus on that, right, that kind of like impacts how we feel too. So my as the ambassador here of love, I'm trying to say, okay, like, look, right, like there's a lot that's not right that's going on, but this is one thing. We can put our energy here. We can focus this way.
When people come to the show, what can they expect? You've given us a little bit of a preview. What are some other things they can expect? Well, and some of the feedback you've had from people who've experienced this, and how it's changed their lives, maybe enriched their lives as well. I'm sure you get a lot of wonderful feedback from people.
Yes, I do indeed. In fact, this is just a little side note. Last year, I had two of my...
You guys love notes and side notes.
Yeah. I love side note. Last year, two of the cast members, they were actually, one was from New York and one was from Florida. They fell in love at LoveNotes. So that was a fun story. Now, it didn't quite last, but it was fun while it lasted. But what can the theater goer expect? So we do have a couple things. So I created, and I'm looking over my shoulder, trying to find it. Wish I would have had it right here at my fingertips. It's from the playbill itself, and it's not exactly a playbill. It's my own design, but in that it has some interactive prompts that you might find in the book. So that's a little point of difference. And you would expect this is going to be a choreographed show. So there's, like we talked a little bit about earlier, the music and the stories woven together. And then we also have, I'm going to encourage everyone, because like we were talking about, like where to look for the love and how to look for the love. Theater goers, we have these little red envelopes with little note cards. So the challenge is that everybody take 5 note cards on their way out, and these are free. It's just part of the event, and to write a little love note to someone. And it doesn't have to be like romantic love, but anyone, whether it's your doorman, and you can just sort of, like who wouldn't want to get a love note? And when we start spreading love, there's sort of this ripple butterfly effect, I think, that we can create throughout the world. So that's going to be one of the little kind of interactive events. And then of course there'll be books there. So if somebody wants to buy a book, and I actually have, my daughter is going to wrap several of them ahead of time in red paper. So if you need a Valentine's Day gift, but I think they make great gifts too. Like if you're going to dinner, you can take some love, lasts longer than a bottle of wine, for your host, for bridesmaids, a wedding gift, someone that's gone through a really bad breakup, things like that. So we'll have books there. And then, like I said, the whole experience with the little bar, and they have some snacky stuff. So that's what it'll be like. And then there'll be an opportunity after the show to talk to the storytellers. So it's not as if like when you go to off Broadway here, typically the audience, you don't have a chance to interact with the cast. So that's a little bit different. There's a little more synthesis between the audience and the storytellers. And I'll be there so you can say hi. And
that's going to be great. That's fantastic. It's exciting. And right at the same time, it's the day after Valentine's Day, the show itself, the book, anybody can get it any time. I believe it's Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold too, right?
Yes. But one thing, make sure if you're going to search for it, to put the words LoveNotes together. There's no space between the love and the notes.
Put it all together.
Yeah, LoveNotes. And then if you're still having trouble, put the word real there. LoveNotes, real people, real story. And you should be, it should pop up everywhere. But that was a sort of mistake I made by not separating, because I have it together. So
so
find it.
Put it all together.
Say Heather Christie. You find it eventually.
And you can go to heatherchristiebooks.com to learn about that and everything else that she's doing. You're loving the ride. You're loving all this, aren't you?
Yes, it's fun. It really is fun.
It's exciting. And again, it's coming up. A lot of people, they do what they do on the 14th. This is right after, as it kicks off the weekend, which is really, really beautiful. And again, people can participate as well, which I think is amazing. And you're always looking to increase. And this is something that this ball has really started rolling, hasn't it, Heather?
Yes, I'm hoping so. I feel like sometimes I'm pushing it myself up the mountain. So I'm ready to get it to the top and have it sort of start, finding its people and gaining momentum. But no, it's an act of love. It's a walk in faith that this is what I'm supposed to be doing.
What are some other cool things aside from LoveNotes that you're working on?
Well, I'm also working on a play. It's called Password, Parking, and Other Predicaments, based loosely on my brother, who we run a soccer company. He was a former professional soccer company player, and he has a lot of trouble with his passwords. And we always have to do alternate side street parking, and it's ultimately a New Yorker love story. So I'm working on that play. I also have a couple other novels that I've started. I'm about 50 pages in on 2 different novels. But LoveNotes is really kind of taken all of my creative juice and energy in the last year. And I kind of see it probably doing that as I move forward in 2025 as well.
Well, congratulations on all of it. This really has been a, pun intended, labor of love for you, I know, Heather. And again, the book available Amazon and also Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. Go to heatherchristiebooks.com as well and do LoveNotes all together. And the upcoming show at Fabulous Symphony Space in City. It's going to be fantastic. If you get a chance to go, you should be there. If you can't, it will be live streamed as well. And again, it's coming up on the 15th, 8 in the evening. So it's a great time. Get a bottle of wine, some chocolates. If you're going to do a live stream, snuggle up, put a fire on. It is winter at the time of the show right now. Or get yourself to the Big Apple. You'll have a great time. Maybe have some dinner beforehand. See the show, see Heather, see everybody. And you will absolutely love that evening that she's putting together with everybody involved. This was fantastic. And you've been on the right show. All the lovelies watching around the world. And we thank all of our viewers and, of course, all their fabulous comments, too, and expressing their stories. And we encourage folks, if they want to comment below, right on the YouTube channel, you can comment below, give this episode a thumbs up, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, where all these episodes are. This is archived too, so you can see it again and again. Share this with folks. This was a delight to have you with us, Heather. Don't be a stranger. Come by what they call Lovety Hall, which is what this is, designated by the viewers, and come see us again at the Jim Masters Show. We would love to have you with us, my friend, and hope you enjoyed the time with me as much as I absolutely have with you.
Oh, it was so wonderful, Jim. Thank you so much, and hopefully we can spread some love.
That's what it's all about, right? The world needs now Yes,
is love.
love, sweet love. Absolutely. And we'll get it going. Congratulations on everything. One more time, folks, symphonyspace.org and heatherchristiebooks.com. There's also lovenotesworldwide.com too, right? Which is
That's right.
fantastic.
If people want to submit their love stories, go to lovenotesworldwide.com and get involved in Love Notes.
Fantastic. Real pleasure, my friend. Spread the word about the Jim Masters Show. If you know other folks like to pop on, they're all welcome. It's a real delight to have you here. And come see us again, my friend, okay?
Sounds like a plan. Thank you, Jim.
Sending you lots of love. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
Heather Christie joining us here, award-winning author, writer, producer, director, educator, and she is the Love Notes lady. And not only does she have the book, but she also has the play, the show, and it's been so well received, and it's going to be happening again at Symphony Space in New York. I've been there for lots of shows in Manhattan. It is a terrific venue. You're going to absolutely love it. Comfortable seating, beautiful lobby, really, really nice space. There again is the book, Love Notes. You're going to enjoy this. And again, it's real stories, folks, real people. Love Notes is real stories, real people, and real love. A wonderful anthology. And you can get it at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. There's a little bit of the back of the book as well, a little story there for you. And of course, some of the folks are going to be with Heather and company. It's going to be truly amazing. So that is our very special guest, Heather Christie, joining us here, all in her lovely red, as we celebrate love here on the Jim Masters Show. And Love Notes. Hope you enjoyed this episode, gang. If you did, just a little homework. We would love it if you gave us a thumbs up like. If you love this episode and all the episodes you enjoy of the Jim Masters Show series, go right to the thumbs up like icon on the channel, click thumbs up, share this episode on your social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Jim Masters TV, and drop a comment. Tell us about maybe some of your love story experiences. What did you enjoy about this conversation? What did you learn? And maybe is there some things you'd like to share in comments as well? We love having you here. You mean the world to us. Thanks for all the comments, all the support, subscribing to the channel, and just everything that you do to celebrate what we're doing in our entertainment lifestyle celebrity talk show series we call the Jim Masters Show. As they always say, don't forget to love one another, take care of one another, and don't forget to do the very same. Love yourself. It's important to do that. Come see us again. Special guests and celebrity friends stopping by all the time right here at the Jim Masters Show. I'm Jim Masters. Be well. See us again. And thanks for joining us. Cheers.